I wanted to live in a cottage by the sea. I had to start living life for myself. This was not a fun thing that happened. I believe that the secret to life is
Welcome back, investor, to another episode of Passive Income Adventures. Today, we've got a guest on who is calling in from Panama, Anne Michelle Wan. She's been specializing in real estate investing from that area, and she has a great 40-year investment history where she can share with us her story, similar to kind of what we're doing. We're just a lot younger in our journey where we just left our corporate jobs like 2 years ago. And Anne Michelle has created businesses, sold businesses. She's now on career, I don't know. We'll have to ask her career number 2 or 3, just trying to figure out what brings her the most fulfillment, making passive income, the balance between volunteering and working or building a business, how to make sure that you're finding fulfillment in your life through both business and personal life. So she's gonna really take us through her timeline and explain all sorts of issues that we talk about a lot on the show. If you've been listening for a while, you know that for the past 7 years, we've been working on building our own passive income so we can have financial freedom and be work optional so that we have the freedom to spend more time with our loved ones and also to take on projects that we think are interesting, fun, and fulfilling, just like what Anne Michelle has been doing. So I'm really excited to talk to her today so that she can give me her wisdom from being farther down along this path than we currently are. And hopefully you can learn something along the way from the conversation. So thank you for joining us today, Anne Michelle.
well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
You've got just a really interesting story that has just spanned several real estate businesses. You've been in Panama for quite some time doing various types of businesses, and you launched this new one a few years ago. Take us back to the beginning. I went through your LinkedIn and I was impressed by how long you've been doing real estate and how long you've been in Panama specifically. So, walk us back maybe before your first foray into real estate, your first foray into Panama. Tell me where you were and then how you developed in that area, and then we'll get to what you are working on today that's pretty exciting.
My journey started when I became a single mom. I got
Mm,
divorced and became a single mom, and I had to figure out how to support myself and my 2 children in the manner that I wanted to. And I didn't get any child support from the deadbeat dad.
mm,
I got a job to begin with, but I'm not a job person. And every job I got, I quickly escalated into a manager position. And I realized I just should do something for myself. So I got brave, took the leap, and started originally a catering service because I was such a good cook. And I was very successful at that. But what I realized from doing that was doing it as a business, I didn't love it anymore. The hours were nights, weekends, and holidays, just the times I wanted to spend with my family.
Yep.
So I decided to change. And while I was catering, I put myself through beauty school and became a hairdresser. And some friends got me a job at a hair salon. Then I worked my way again up to the top salesperson and built a clientele. And after 3 years, didn't feel like my boss appreciated me. So I went looking for an opportunity. And I walked into this lady's salon and she'd owned it for 17 years. And she said, instead of just renting a chair here, why don't you buy the business? And I had just barely started my real estate journey on the side because I had decided that was my only retirement account. And I happened to have sold a property and had a small down payment I could put on that business. So instead of I'm not a corporate person, I'm more of a serial entrepreneur
Yeah.
business person. So I ended up buying that salon, paying it off within 3 years, growing the business to double its size, buying the building, which she owner financed for me. And then
Nice.
10 years later, selling that business for a sizable profit. And I had opened a second salon during that time. And all the while doing all of that, investing in real estate on the side. So now I can get started on my real estate journey. And people say either you buy a home that you love and it's not an investment or you do investments. I like to combine business with pleasure. Well, what I did when I was looking for my real estate investment was something I could also make money with. And I found a house on the edge of the city. I lived in Boulder, Colorado
Mhm.
at the time, and I lived in Boulder for 35 years, both in the outside of Boulder in the mountains and then in Boulder proper. And I wanted to send my kids to private school. I didn't like the public school system, so I had to make enough money to do that. I found a house on the edge of the city and it was on an acre of land. And that acre I found out was subdividable if you annexed to the city and you could
Mm.
split it into 4 lots and the house was on one of them. I gathered, and some of my neighbors were in the same position. All the houses on the edge of the city, they called it dog patch because the houses were old and run down.
Mhm.
So I gathered my neighbors together. We all annexed together, hooked up to city services, and subdivided the lots. And I sold each of the 3 lots and stayed in the house for 5 years, fixing it up. And we lived in it. And then after 5 years, sold the house as well. That was so much fun to do that I decided to do it again. And I bought 2 other houses on acre lots. And the second one I bought, I divided into 2 lots. And by the time I got to the third one, the city wasn't really letting you divide anymore. So I decided to move into something else and bought rental properties and fix and flips. So I did that, and at one point in time had 5 rental homes in Boulder, Colorado, and that was supporting my savings for retirement and college education for my kids and private school for them, as well. And my salon business was supporting my everyday needs, right? I was a busy girl back then,
Yeah.
but it was all good. It was all good. And on my vacations, I dreamed of going to warm beaches, and I'd been dreaming of warm beaches most of my life because I'm a cold person and I'm a water person. And I wanted to live in a cottage by the sea, especially the Caribbean Ocean. So every time I got a vacation, whether it was with a boyfriend or a husband or a girlfriend that I traveled with in different times and things in my life, we went to a warm beach in exotic locations and traveled many places in the world doing that. And finally decided that Central America was a perfect place to really look for a place in the sun. I had then so traveled around Mexico because my son had moved to Mexico by then to meet the
Mhm.
love of his life. I went to Belize, loved Belize, but it was already too expensive when I was searching. Wanted to go to Costa Rica in the 90s. Costa Rica was hot, but I kept going to Costa Rica and didn't quite find the right thing. I go a lot by gut feelings and it just either was too remote or already too expensive for my budget at the time. And then where else did we go? We skipped Nicaragua, and that was too wild, wild west.
Yeah. Back then, yeah, for sure.
And anyway, I saw an ad in a magazine called International Living. It said cheapest land in the Caribbean. I went, ooh, and called
Yeah.
that number and subsequently went over the border, visited for 4 days and said, "This is the split space. This is where I
Okay.
wanna be." And I ended up buying 1 property the first year I was visiting, and the next year came down and bought a second property there. One was commercial, one was a residential lot to build a house on at a later time. In the meantime, I still had my life going on in the States, and I wasn't gonna move down right away. So I worked on selling the salons. I worked on divesting of some of the real estate I had accumulated, including a 44-unit apartment building that I owned with a group that I had syndicated, and just generally tightening things up so that I would have assets free to move to Panama at a future date. And I kept putting it off and putting it off. My kids were grown and had their own businesses. They wanted me to help them in those businesses. And I did. But finally, I realized that I had to start living life for myself and do something for myself. And I wanted to live my dream. So the catalyst for that was 2008 crash.
Yes.
That's
Oof.
I got caught in that just like everybody else.
Mhm.
Fortunately for me, because of my positioning, I didn't lose everything like some people did. But I did lose a fair amount of equity, and I was in my 50s and just getting ready to retire. And I said, I'm not going to give up my dream just because this happened. I had to short sale my personal home, which I really loved, and I lost a few properties, but I was able to hold on to some of it. And after wallowing in self pity a little bit, I decided that I was a resilient person and I would figure out what to do. And it seemed the perfect time to transition to Panama. The salons were sold. My mother had passed away. The kids were grown and it was time. So I moved to Panama and rented an apartment and never looked back. And that's been a whole nother journey here. I actually bought property here 25 years ago, those 2 properties I was talking about, and then over the next 5 to 10 years, I sold the salons and divested as much as I wanted to, and then when 2008 hit, made the move in 2010 full time.
So before we get into your Panama section of your journey, I have a couple of questions about what you just said, some things I'd like some more details on. You mentioned that you syndicated a 44 unit apartment building. Can you just briefly tell us how that came about? Because people see, oh, a lot of our listeners own a couple of rental houses, and some of them want to go down the path of being just passive. They're like, I don't really like property management. I don't really like
Yeah,
shuffling around trying to find deals. I
yeah,
just really want to, now that I get this game a little, give my money to somebody who's really in this full time. And others actually want to scale from their couple of rental portfolio properties over into something larger like a syndication. So can you tell us just what that transition looked like for you when you, how you found that property and how you put that group together, especially before syndication was really something that we could do publicly through the
yeah.
regulation? Tell us how you legally structure that as well.
Okay. I was seriously into real estate by that time and owned my rental properties that I was both renting for periods of time, depreciating for 5 years and then selling, and then also fixing and flipping some. And I wanted to do something bigger, and I had a bit of a reputation as being successful in the real estate business, even though, and I had gotten my real estate license as well and was working for a company so I could find deals on the MLS. I also was friendly with other realtors who were investor friendly. So between my own skills and the skills of other people that were in my circle at the time, I was able to find, starting with friends and family, to invest in my, I'm going to call it a family office. We formed a corporation, an LLC with limited partners, and I was the general partner. And people invested money. We had a $50,000 minimum and collected enough for the down payment on this apartment building, as well as we did some other investments, but we'll just talk about that. And I didn't have to manage it. Like you said, it was more passive. And that's the direction I was heading, is to have enough passive income to not have to work. And that's where I am today. But then I was just forming those relationships in that.
Yeah, no, yeah, great. I feel like when people syndicate, they mean like when the laws change, like in 2012 and 2017,
Yeah.
the way that you can now put together groups of limited partnerships, you got to have this big PPM. It's super expensive to put together. Did it look different? What year was that you bought that 44
Almost.
unit?
Oh my goodness. That was like 2006.
Okay. So
And
this,
it was before all that. The structure was pretty simple. You just
okay.
formed a company, and I was using non-accredited investors. It was only 44 units.
Okay.
Um, and it was like running a company back then. I know it's more stringent now, and that's one of the reasons I stopped doing it,
Okay.
especially when I moved to Panama.
Okay. Yeah, because it is definitely more complicated now, and we look at like, why can't we just do it like this? And then I'll talk to somebody who was investing like maybe in the 90s or the early 2000s. And that's actually how it used to be.
Yeah,
So there are a lot more regulations now. And it's good for the passive investor to understand what that looks like because I feel like we need to understand if the people who are operating the business are doing it by the book, because that says something. It's just doing it by the book now is a lot harder, I think, than it used to be.
that
But
may be true, and that probably is true. However, there's a lot of people still doing it.
and that's why it's important to be aware of what the legal structure
Yeah,
should look like.
just need a good
Yeah.
attorney to guide you through the process.
Yes. Either a real estate attorney, a business attorney, or specifically a securities attorney, I've seen can help navigate through the paperwork. If you're thinking of doing any investment, you'll put in 50,000 or $100,000 into an investment with somebody that you know, and you didn't pay a couple $100 to an attorney to just review that the docs are all in order or that
Right.
they don't have any securities violations or other kind of fraud background. Or sometimes you can even hire a private investigator for a couple $100 just to figure out like what else have they owned? Are they actually on title of the properties they say they own? There's just those basic kind of things, couple $100, maybe $1,000 to do due diligence. We were talking to another guest recently, and he was talking about the difference between an institutional and a retail investor. And he said institutional investors will spend 100 grand vetting a deal before they
Yeah,
spend $10 million. He said it's a percentage of what you're going to invest needs to go to due diligence. So I really did like that comparison. It's like we need to know what the rules are and pay a little bit to protect our capital before we just jump in. And retail investors sometimes are too cheap to do that.
I completely agree with you. If you can't spend a couple $100 to vet your, your syndicator, then we shouldn't be investing.
Just stick to the public markets, stick to the public markets. Yeah, and I don't tell people that very often, but there is a little bit of upfront work when you wanna jump into private markets, because on public market, the reason it's public is because the SEC or the regulatory bodies that are in those industries have done the vetting for you. That's why they made it through the IPO process, so they could be publicly traded to teenagers, basic Robinhood account. So that's basically the difference of getting into public versus private. There's a little bit more upfront work in a private market, and I want our investors to understand that it's their responsibility, not the SEC's responsibility to vet that out. Yeah. It's a fascinating story. And I just, like I said, you just lost over about a 44 unit apartment building. And I just want to make sure that people understand like that is possible. I fell into my first 50 unit by accident, just in my network, and putting it together was very difficult. But the way that I found it was just somebody posted on Facebook that they wanted to sell this 50 unit, the owners weren't getting along. So it's like a
Mhm.
divorce. And
Yeah.
so we got it for a pretty good price because they didn't want to deal with each other anymore. So those kinds of
Mhm.
things come along when you're networking with the right people.
Perfect. Yes, you're absolutely right about that. You
Yeah.
find those don't wanters, and you obviously had the energy to attract that.
Yeah, don't wanters. I've never heard that, but I'm gonna start using that. Yeah. A lot of we have some that we've sold. Now we don't want that property anymore and it's on the market. So it's a cycle you go through. But another thing that you mentioned was in 2008, you did lose a lot of people, like you said, lost everything. Can you tell me the difference between the properties that you were managing to hold on to? How were you able to save those versus the ones that you weren't able to save? Do you see any patterns there of properties that you were able to save
Yeah.
foreclosure or save from that?
The ones that I was able to save, I had a lot more equity in them,
Okay.
and the cash flow was higher, and I was able to still make payments on those properties. And the ones that I lost were the newer purchases that they had adjustable rates back then, and you were
Yeah.
encouraged to get an adjustable rate because in 3 years your renters were going to buy them and all of this stuff. When the crash happened, rates went astronomical and renters couldn't pay their payments. And if you didn't have the resources to pay those, if you had the resources, you could hold on. But if you didn't, you're going to lose the property. And so I had a
Right.
couple of newer purchases where I tried those adjustable loans, and those were the ones that went. And then the ones that I had owned for longer and had more equity in and was more manageable, I was able to keep.
Were you able to keep them through vacancies? Like, even if it was vacant, you were still able to pay the mortgage? Is that what you're specifically referring to?
I did have enough of a savings account to I had to choose which ones I was gonna save and which ones I was
Oh,
gonna roll.
okay.
And
So
so
were things going vacant, or did you have renters who were like, "I can't pay," and they had to move out, or just have people in there being delinquent that you weren't gonna evict because you knew you couldn't fill it, or what did the vacancy look like during that time?
oh gosh, that was a long time ago. It wasn't the vacancy. People didn't wanna move out, they didn't have anywhere to go, but they
Okay,
pay their rent. So you had to make adjustments with them and take anything you could get at that time. And those were the properties that I needed to let go of. So we either
okay.
sold them or let them go back to the bank or whatever.
So the ones where you had the rent, maybe you could modify the rent, being flexible, take the rent down a little bit so that they could stay in there. So you just have something. If that rent was still enough to cover the mortgage and some minor repairs, you're like, this is the one I'm choosing. If that lowered rent couldn't cover expenses, you're like, I'm going to have to let this one go.
Yeah.
Okay, those are some pretty awful decisions. But the fact is that you were able to practice triage and you knew your criteria, you knew what was worth saving. You weren't throwing good money after bad money, and you were able to cut your losses. That is so difficult. You said something else that really caught me. We were talking to a potential investor recently who had lost a lot of money on a business that he had purchased and wanted to just rebuild that loss very quickly. And I said, you're still in the mode of embarrassment and shame over all this money that you've lost, and you're not making sound decisions right now. You don't really have your goals are not clear. You've lost touch with why you're doing any of this in the first place. And I feel like you have almost this internal conflict of interest where you just make it back as fast as possible. So that's really what got you into this position in the first place, buying a business that was supposed to be the box or no, like inside the box, where it's here's a business. It's pretty easy. You just hire a GM to run it all for you. And you got into that easy money. You're racing headlong towards that same thing. So you said you went through a period where you felt like, I don't remember how you phrase it, but like a spanked dog or something like that. You had that shameful slump
Oh, and
of a
wallowed in
period.
self-pity.
Yeah, yeah. So how long did that take? And tell us, like, for somebody else who's lost money on a deal or lost money in a business,
And
what does that wallowing look like? How do you get through it faster? I say the only way to go through it is to go through it. But
yeah.
tell us about that process of recovery so that you feel like, yeah, I can go take on something again.
I'm normally a very resilient person and I always look on the positive side of
Mm.
things. And I'm also a spiritual person and I believe in energy. What I do in situations like that is I allow myself to feel my feelings, feel depressed, feel sorry for myself, feel angry, feel shame, whatever I needed to feel at the time, lay on the couch for days, whatever, but not forever. I set a time limit for it and I said, I'm going to allow myself because I gotta. This was not a fun thing that happened. It happened to everybody, some worse, some better. And so I did that and it just really took me a few weeks and it's personal to everybody how long grief and all those feelings might take for them. And then I just said, okay, there's a silver lining in this and I'm going to find it and I am going to grow from this experience. I'll never over leverage again and I will make lemonade out of lemons. I will recover from this better than ever. Just like when I left my abusive husband, I said, I'll recover from this better than ever, whether you support me or not. And I did. And it was the same thing with this thing that life, that all of us, I needed to figure out a way to recover and come out the other side better than ever. Now,
Okay.
part of that decision was moving to Panama so that I could at least semi retire. And what I found out was I didn't want to retire. Well, we'll get to that.
Yes, let's get to the point. So you're recovering and you're feeling like maybe I think when it happens to everybody because it's during a downturn, that's what made me feel better about some of the losses that we had in 2023, I think was
Yeah.
when it was a rough year. Same thing in commercial adjustable rate mortgages that were on short terms, like things like this. It's the same kind of thing you saw happen in commercial that happened in residential in 2008. Different causative factors, but
Yes.
some of the financial products, the loan products were similar, and you could see how that took some properties down. So I was feeling mopey about it, and I was trying to make myself feel better. Everybody went through it. It doesn't mean that I made bad decisions or choosing this group of people to invest with and all of that. But then when I looked at what it did to my overall portfolio performance, like I would have done better in much, much safer vehicles. My safer vehicles actually outperformed those high yield equity investments because one deal where I had a negative 100% return, I lost all the money, really harmed my portfolio to the degree that it dropped the entire return down to about or maybe even slightly less than what would have made if I'd stayed in the more boring stuff that I was scoffing at. Oh man, I can do much better than that. That taught me a lesson, and instead of trying to make myself feel better, like all of this happened to everybody, I was like, wait a second. No, I feel worse. Like I've really done a lot of damage to my portfolio. What was I doing? And that's when I really started to hit through the grief phase because I realized I had made some poor decisions thinking that if everything had worked out the way that it was supposed to, it would have been great, right? But when it didn't, I didn't have the ability my portfolio was overexposed to that risk, and I should have been
Yes.
tinier bit in that. So anyway, that grief process I think is really important for the listener to understand because you will lose money and you
Yeah.
need to learn how to get through it, how to lose the least amount possible, how to balance your portfolio so you're losing the least amount possible. So once you get through that, it's my little soapboxy thing. Once you get through that, you move to Panama so that you can retire with less money. You had to basically adjust your expectations, but then you get down there and you found like this entirely new sense of purpose and career. So walk us through how you arrived at that point and then up to what you're doing right now.
Okay. At first, when we first moved, it was like, just take it easy, drink the mojitos on the beach
Uh-huh.
and visit with friends and have lunches. But what I quickly assessed was that this place was ripe for a boom. It was
Mhm.
2010, 2011, and things were recovering from 2008, and people were looking for something that was offered here, either a vacation home or a second home or a second life like expat like I became. And there was only 3 real estate companies in the whole town where we moved, Bocas del Toro. None of them were global. So what I
Mhm.
did was I researched what the best global company would be, and I bought a franchise.
Okay.
Saw the opportunity and I couldn't resist. I said, I can't stay retired when I see this boom coming. So I did. I bought the franchise. I started the business. I did it on my commercial property in Bocastown. And I built that business from scratch and kept it for 10 years, sold it for six figures, and never been happier because I, again, created something from nothing and made people happy in the process. I probably sold hundreds of homes, some of them twice, and made myself happy doing something that I like to do. How fun is it to show property in a boat? Focuses
Yeah.
across islands off the coast of Panama, and I showed property in a boat most of the time, right? But I'm the
Yeah.
kind of person that about every 10 years or so, I like to evolve and transition into something else. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to try to retire again. And I sold that business. And that was 3 years ago. I lasted about 6 months. And then I said, let me just do something part time online. Now the online thing was really becoming popular. And I said, let me try to market myself online. But I tried that and I didn't like it. And I quickly realized that if I was going to do something fulfilling for myself and give back to my community and the world at large by a ripple effect, that I was going to have to use my expertise to do it. And so I revamped my LinkedIn profile, just decided to become a developer. By this time, I have enough passive income to live my life here in paradise, right? I don't have to work. But for extra play money, if I want to buy a bigger boat or if I want to go on an exotic vacation across the world, I need some extra play money. So that building and selling one house a year provides that. And I've done that for the past 3 years. I built it and sold three houses now. The third one I just finished about 3 months ago, and I just put it under contract yesterday.
Many congratulations.
Oh,
That
well,
feels so good. You wanna it's like you enjoy the process of building.
I
I
do. I love picking out doors and light fixtures and designing. Just so happens that my husband is a civil engineer and custom home builder. He used to build custom homes in the States, and that's how he got together was real estate. So he would help me design the homes, and then I would go and build them. And we would have a local contractor build the framework and the outside, close it all in, do the systems and stuff. And then the finish work, Doug and I would go in and do all the tile and all the fun stuff, all the lighting and the decorating.
yeah. We call that you hire someone to do the Home Depot part, and then we do the Lowe's part.
And exactly. Exactly. So
We say Lowe's is the chick version of Home Depot.
there you go.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic story. So what if you just put that under contract recently, what
Yesterday.
yesterday, yeah, I always joke that a lot of the things that I do, I love doing, but then I can't wait to finish them. And this was the thing that concerns me. Like when we're hiking, I start a hike and I'm like, how long is it? How many hours? How many miles? About what time can we be finishing? And then when it gets really hard, I can't wait to be done. I'm like, why am I doing this if I can't wait to be done? And so I had to find a little bit more joy in the process. When I used to sew, I'd make a dress and then it would sit on a hanger waiting for I can't wait to finish this thing, and then I do the tedious stuff right at the end to hem things so I can put it on. So, when you get done with a project like this, as fun as it is, are you itching to go on to the next one, or by the end of it, you're like, "I can't wait to be done." How are you deciding what to do next now that you have this one under contract and pretty much sold?
I believe that the secret to life is enjoying the passage of time. So
Mhm.
I've taught myself patience and I didn't feel like I can't wait to be done, but I was glad it was done.
Mhm.
And I take a break between houses. I don't just move right into the next one. And now that I've done my third house, the market's changed. And now when
Mm.
I started doing this, there was hardly any competition. And now everybody and their brother's trying to build houses and sell them. So I've decided to do something different once again.
Yes.
I'm getting back to my roots. I'm going to form a family office and gather investors, and I'm going to build a over 55 community, which has not been done here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, so we travel full time and we ended up in Florida last year for a couple of months. I guess it was 2020. Was it 23? Yeah, it's been a while. So we're in Florida and there were 55 communities everywhere. And then when we came back west, we're driving through Phoenix and all these build to rent communities, some of them 55 plus, some of them not. I feel like 55 has been around like in Phoenix and maybe Florida for a while, but this build to rent that's not 55 is booming, especially in Phoenix. Tell me about that market. How did you find out about it? And what were the thing like, "Hey, I actually wanna do that." What did that process look like for you?
I'm a natural. gap filler. I
Okay.
know things. I notice what's happening around me, and then I see the gaps in the market and I go to fill them. And what I noticed while I had my real estate franchise and while I was building homes the last 3 years was that there were people moving down here who absolutely love it, would then be here for a few years, develop health conditions, and have to move because there was no
Yep.
amenities and services to serve them. There
Yep.
wasn't that kind of thing. And also, I saw people searching online and asking me questions about what's available here for healthcare and for pickleball and that kind of thing. And I said, there's a thing here like that. So I decided I'm going to fill a gap.
Even we're just like 50, right?
Yeah.
And we're starting to think about, I don't want to say the retirement home because that conjures nursing home, but we're talking about the home that we're going to build for our married children, the grandchildren, place where everybody can gather, the family reunion.
Mhm.
Let's call it that. And so we're looking at land, and my husband's looking at some stuff that's way far out, very rural.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
feel like we looked at abroad. I'm like, I just don't really feel like we can leave our kids be so far away. And they didn't move to Mexico. That would be actually really nice. They would do something like that so we could be closer. But we have 6 children, and we just don't really feel like
Yeah.
we can really depend on all of them. We need to stay where they are because I want to be near grandkids and all that. And so as we're moving through this, and he's looking at super remote stuff, we ruled out abroad. And I said, honey, we've got to be close to a hospital. And I know this sounds like we're old when we're not, but we have had way too many friends, siblings, extended family who have bought the dream home and the little horse ranch or whatever. And not only did it become too difficult for them to care for on their own, but it was way too far away from healthcare. And they have moved back closer to the city and a
Yeah.
city lot and made adjustments to the family
Mhm.
reunion policy. They can be closer to healthcare. And I knew, I said, we just need to make sure that we don't make that same mistake that so many of our friends have
Yeah.
made. Others have downsized too hard,
Mhm.
thinking we got to be close to a hospital, we got to be close to our family and things like that. We don't have to be close to the city for business anymore, but then they
Mhm.
downsize too hard and they can't even host like a Sunday dinner. And so trying to figure out what that looks like for the 55 plus, that's a challenge. So tell me about that because you're also thinking about being closer to healthcare and being closer to maybe your business. How do you pick a place that it's such a personal decision, but what are the factors we should?
It's such a personal decision, and you're exactly right. There's nothing wrong with the way you're thinking. You're forward thinking, your future planning, and those are good things to consider. I don't think you want to be too remote. We call them down here, we call them family compounds.
Yes.
People buy a big house or a house that has other houses on the property and make a
Mhm.
family compound, and they bring down the kids and they bring down the grandkids, and that's one of the things we're gonna do in our community for people that do wanna move abroad is they can bring their families if they want to. Either
Yeah.
mom and dad discover Bocas and they love it, and the kids come visit and they go, "Oh my god, this is paradise." We're gonna have this is not just gonna be it's gonna be a transformative over 55 community with room for multi-generational people. Yeah, and then even the grandkids can come down as well, and there'll be places for them. So when you're looking, if you want to stay in the United States, I don't think it's a bad thing to consider where the hospital is and where the other amenities that you're going to need are when you're considering creating a family compound of some sort.
Yeah, I think that's basically what we're talking about, the family compound with multiple outbuildings on it. We had an experience, I don't like to share it too much because it's not my story to share, but an experience with a family member who couldn't find a place to live, and the family members were on both sides were like, "How long does this person need a place to stay? Is this person gonna get a job? Is this person gonna" and I just remembered thinking about other family members of ours or friends who had close family members who were never gonna get a job. They were never going to be able to live on their own, whether it was due to some sort of disability, addiction, or some other problem. And I just said, wouldn't it be nice to have a place? This makes me emotional. Wouldn't it be nice to have a place where people close to us could come and stay safely for free without any expectation? They do something different and just a safe place to land,
Yeah.
hopefully temporarily. But what if it's not temporary? What if they really can't
Mm.
get it together?
I just love what you're saying and how you're feeling because I feel the same way. And part of our community also, we're hoping to create a spot for elders or anybody that needs a safe place to land that doesn't have the money that will be able to somehow scholarship them or something where they'll
Mhm.
be. It will still be an exchange, even if it's an exchange of energy.
Yeah, and then, what you're saying makes it unique from a 55 plus community. One of the
Correct.
reasons we have not looked into that, we're like, "In 5 years, we could be in a 55 plus," but we have rejected that because of the multi-generational and want to have a place to put maybe more than one person who needs something more long term. So how is yours different from that? Because most covenants 55 plus pretty strict, like, they don't want kids being noisy.
It's not going to be your typical over 55 community. There'll be a section for what we call the elders that
Mhm.
need their privacy and their quiet. And there'll be sections for digital nomads and people that want to do business or be here part time. And a section for people that want to bring their or these grandparents and parents, they want to bring their grandkids down to visit. That's got to
Yeah.
be okay. And we're going to allow pets because pets help you live vibrantly, especially if you don't have anybody else.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful vision that you're creating, and sometimes people will come and they'll talk to me about these business visions that they have. They wanna do an eco-friendly lodge, treehouse thing that do and I'm like, I just it's too blue ocean for me, like, I don't know if people will invest in this. I like boring, rinse and repeat, tried and true. I'm not exactly in preservation of capital mode quite yet. We've hit our fire number, like the number we wanted to have so that we could leave our jobs, but I would still like to build on that. We had multiple, "Okay, this is absolute minimum." We reached that, and we're like, "Okay, we like to build to the next couple levels." And so I like to invest in super boring stuff. I'm getting close to preservation of capital. But what you're telling me doesn't sound really crazy blue ocean. It sounds almost like maybe because of your deep background in real estate investing, in building, and in Panama specifically, it doesn't make me feel like, well, I don't know if this is going to survive. So talk to your potential investor why something like this could work and what business models have proven against. How do you feel the confidence that you feel, the excitement to go and build something kind of new?
Yeah, no, and real estate is risky, and this is no different. But I feel grounded in my expertise. I feel confident that I can create and be successful in whatever I do, and that I choose carefully what I'm going to do. The other thing is that my investors, this is what I call impact investing. It's
Yes.
not people who just want to invest to make a return, although we will make a good return. And that return will vary depending on your level of participation.
Mhm.
If you want to use the property more for yourself, then you're going to get a lower rate of return. If you want to just do it as a pure investment, you're going to get a higher rate of return. But just as primary as the return is the impact it's going to make on the community and the people that work there that care about the people that live there. And then ripple out to that community, which ripples out to Panama, which ripples out to the world.
Yeah. Yes. Then thinking about that long-term approach, which investors love. I love thinking long-term. In fact, sometimes I sacrifice the short term for future Emma, and I have to remind myself, like,
Right.
but it sounds like so tell me about that investment. It sounds like you're back to syndicating
Yes.
some investments. You have some experience with that. It's more stringent now. What led you to say, I'm gonna syndicate this thing?
Well,
And how are you structuring that?
yeah, since I'm outside the United States, coming to Panama is like going back 50 years of the United States where it was simpler. So the
Right.
laws here and forming the corporations and doing the whole thing is more like it used to be, which makes me feel comfortable. My business plan is, you were saying how you want to do boring investments, and my business plan is boring and it's tried and true, hopefully covering all the points that people need to feel safe in investing with us. And at the same time, it's innovative and transforming and impactful for us in the community.
Yes. It has a good balance of tried and true and filling a gap, like you said. That's
Yep.
what I like.
And one of the other ways we're staying safe is we're not going to finance any of this. We're going to build this with cash. And we're going to be profitable starting at 23% occupancy. It's very safe in that respect. Once it's built, it'll take about
Yep.
2 years to build it once we have the funds, a few more years to optimize the occupancy. And it's not going to be a huge place either. It depends on how many units we can fit on the land. Hopefully 32 units, but not sure yet because we just secured the land. And I have to do some work with the architects to see how many units we can fit in there. Then once it's fully occupied, we'll be able to then refinance and pull some money out of the investor's money, but at least some of it. Still enjoy the cash flow. I'm still on the property or sell it if we
Yeah.
want to.
Yes. Yeah. I love this business model because we're traveling full time and because we have looked at retiring abroad pretty seriously. We're not ready for it yet, but we're just planning ahead because that's, what I do. But it sounds like a place I would love to I've never been to Panama before. Fly
You
down
should
and just
you should just
come visit.
visit, no agenda, just see how stunning it is and how it has something for everybody. If you want city life, Panama City is like Miami. It's
Yes.
everything you could want, culture, high rises, everything. I'm not a city person. If you want beachfront, you've got 2 oceans. You've got the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, which is the Caribbean. I prefer the Caribbean. That was my dream to have a cottage by the sea on the Caribbean, and here I am looking out at it every day.
Yes.
Yeah. And then if you want, I mean, it's got mountains too. We're going to be paralleling 2 developments, doing a second one up in Boquete, which is 3,500 feet above sea level.
Mhm.
Temperatures there. I'm a tropical girl. My favorite temperature is like 80 to 85 degrees.
Okay.
What it is here. But some people are too hot with that. And so for
Yeah.
them, we're going to be doing something up in the mountains in an area called Boquete where it's
Mhm.
65 to 75 degrees, a little bit cooler. And we call it eternal spring. And I
Yes.
recently met a guy through LinkedIn who has 700 acres up there. And we're going to work
Oh,
something out with him to do on part of his property, one of our communities, and
yes.
to develop them in parallel. So people who like the ocean can be on the Caribbean and people who like the mountains can be in the mountains. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And one thing we learned when we've been traveling, we hiked across Arizona, very rugged, the eastern part of the state, very mountainous. And we very quickly learned the power of elevation to completely change your living situation. We lived in Salt Lake for 5 years before that. And we can literally look out our bedroom window, and there's no snow on the ground here, and it's sunny and it's nice. But there's a neighborhood on top of a hill, like on the bench, just past the bench of the mountain, where it's covered in snow. And I'm watching it snow on this neighborhood. I'm thinking, I could literally just drive 15 minutes up that hill and have a completely different microclimate. And so we were like, okay, maybe we could have 2 houses. Maybe we could have one in Flagstaff where it's snowy and forest-like and temperate and lots of great mountainous hiking. And then just drive down to Phoenix or Sedona for our second home when we're like, it's too cold. I just need to go warm up for a little while. So that's the plan that we're looking at right now is maybe to find something that's close enough proximity wise, but
Exactly.
something like what you're talking about where
So
you have,
funny that you say that because that's what we did for 10 years.
yeah.
And one of the things that happened to me when I first got here is I actually bought a third property. I talked about the 2 properties that I bought, the
Mhm.
commercial and the residential, but I didn't want to go up in the mountains of Panama because I came from Colorado where I lived in the mountains and lived at the foot of the mountains. I said, I had enough mountains. I don't want to go up in the mountains. They said, you just got to go. It's so stunningly beautiful. So I went
Yeah.
up to Boquete, and it was amazing. It was just like the Rocky Mountains, like Rocky Mountain National Park, but with
Yep.
different foliage, tropical foliage, and different
Mhm.
birds. And it was amazing. And I met a guy who took an 80-acre coffee plantation. He was from Breckenridge, and he built a gated community that was on the, and this coffee plantation had a river running through it. So he built a 9-hole golf course and these villas along this river. And I couldn't, again, I couldn't resist. This was the last of my money that I had to invest. And I bought this villa on the third hole of the golf course up in Boquete. And my family and I went back and forth from when it was windy and rainy up in Boquete, we'd go down to Bocas and enjoy the ocean and the warmth and the sun. We'd go up to the mountain and enjoy the cool weather and hiking around the mountains. So it did end up being a beautiful journey. We
Yeah.
decided to focus our efforts. I did that in 2000 and then decided to sell the mountain property in 2010 and focus our efforts here in Bocas del Toro fully on the ocean.
Yeah, I wonder I do have a lot of, like, my extended family, like my mom's cousins, things like that, who will travel back and forth, and one was in and out of Tucson pretty frequently, but she was so far from their other home in a different state. She'd be like, "I forgot this," or "I forgot that," or "I have to have 2 of everything." So I thought having something closer together like what you're describing
Yeah.
would be easier, so you'd be like, "Hey, I need to run down to wherever for
And maybe
airport or
within
whatever."
1 to 3 hours or so from where you pick your primary place, and then 3 hours or so from there, find
Yeah.
something else.
We were hiking through Tucson and it was so hot and the kids were melting, and we hiked up to Summer Haven, which is on the top of a mountain right outside of Tucson, and it was snowing. And I thought, okay, this is teaching me an important lesson on using altitude to control where you want to be and having the freedom to be able to do that that's where that idea really took shape. Like we want to have a
Yeah.
house where our family can go. so we can have more, but still be close enough to community so we can volunteer because a lot of what we do requires being near a location so we can go volunteer. So all of these kinds of things are things that you have to think about when you retire on passive income so that you can design a lifestyle that suits your family, your loved ones, the most important people in your life, but also allows you to serve the greater community, which you're doing a great example of showing, and Michelle, your passion for helping other people and for solving problems. And then can you briefly mention the nonprofit that your husband is managing and volunteering for? And then we'll tell people how to get a hold of you if they would like to invest in your project.
I am the business person in the family, and my husband is passionate about his nonprofit. So we're a power couple, in my opinion.
Yes.
And he has a company called Caribbean Coral Restoration, and that is based in Colorado, but it funds the company here, which is Ayuda a la Tierra, or Love for the Earth. And what he does is he seed banks coral, and he creates structures in the ocean for the deteriorating coral that recreates fish habitats. So he's not only regenerating coral that is more resilient to the pollution and the higher temperatures, but he's creating fish habitats for the depletion of the fish population in not only this area, but lots of areas. And he's just doing it here. And he just
Yeah.
loves what he does, and he employs indigenous people to do it. I could never do what he's doing. I just keep the books for him.
Yeah. It takes, like you said,
And
it
he
takes
knows.
it's a power couple kind of a move where you're combining business, fulfillment, volunteering, service, all of this. And this is really what creates a beautiful life. It's inspiring to me. I feel like I want to be you when I grow up. And I appreciate you sharing your story with me and with our listener. So, how can the listener get a hold of you? And what type of person would be best served by reaching out to you after the show?
Anyone interested in it that has disposable income that they would like to invest is a good fit for me, that is into heart impact investing first and ROI second. You can reach me. I have a LinkedIn profile. You can reach me there. And Michelle Wan, Passive Profit Partners is my business page, or my website, passiveprofitpartners.com. It has dashes between the letters. It's www.passive-profit-partners.com. So those two ways are good ways to get a hold of me. And if you want to chat more about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and if you want to do it too.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's inspiring stories like these that help me as the host. I feel like I get the most out of this, right? But also the listener to be able to figure out like where can I invest? How can I build the lifestyle that I really want? Is it possible to even live on passive income? How do I do that? And surrounding ourselves with people like you who have done it and shown like it's not rocket science. It's just consistency and discipline over time and networking and finding the right people to invest with. So I appreciate you as a listener spending some time with us. I know that your time is the most valuable thing, that investing your time upfront now will reap you rewards in more time down the road that you can choose to spend how you want, giving back, serving either through volunteering or business. It's the choice is yours. It's such a personal decision that you're going to go through. And meeting people who have already navigated these can tell you their experiences or the criteria that they weighed. And so that you know at least the types of things you should be looking at. So I really appreciate you spending that time. It will serve you later on down the road as you continue to build your own passive income journey. If you'd like to reach out to Michelle, check out that website. If you'd like to reach out to me, partnerwithrise.com. You can jump on our calendar, talk about the investments that boring, super stable stuff that we like to invest in for cash flow and for preservation of wealth. And then we have people on like Michelle who can help you diversify a little bit more so that you can do something with your money that is a nice diversified basket that gets you the lifestyle that you want with the risk level that you can sustain long term. So again, thank you for joining us and I can't wait to hear from you.